Okay, so I'm making a video for the first time about things in general. I don't look very good because I don't have any makeup on. I just kind of woke up and here I am. But it's important. What I wanted to say is that the universe is like a great teaching machine, and that's why I wrote my book, The Textbook of the Universe, The Genetic Ascent to God, because it's important to understand that people wanting to learn is not just kind of a coincidence. It's not something we just want to do. It's something that was meant to happen. That's why we have the ability to make symbols. It's why originally the Egyptians thought hieroglyphics were holy. And it's why we have metaphor. We understand we've turned our ability to make symbols into a language with grammar, and the very symbols we use reflect the way that the universe works. Like we have an alphabet, and just like we have an alphabet of reality in the periodic table. So the periodic table can be combined in different ways, all the elements to make what we have in nature, and we can use letters, an alphabet, to form words or molecules to make symbols that resemble the things that we have hold in our minds, the things that we have learned and that we can teach to other people. The universe does this too. The universe, just like the periodic table, it's like something that can be read. You can understand what's going on, where we came from, where we're headed, by reading the universe. So I'd like to start off by saying that what human brains do is select probabilities. And the reason this is important is because we're headed somewhere with this, and you can see this through so many different things. It's really difficult to put into words. But what people don't understand is that we think in terms of space-time and our own survival, usually. So when you try to think about what was there before space-time existed, we tend to think that, well, space-time is everything that we know, and in space-time, there's things that we want and that we head towards, that we see and we avoid. There's things within space-time, so space-time feels like nothing. It is the framework within we get the things we need and move towards the things we want and away from the things we don't want. So we have this feeling that there can be a state of nothingness, but really space-time is not nothing. We know that now, that the vacuum and the zero-point energy and all that stuff, the vacuum is full of stuff. The Chandra X-ray Observatory showed us that and everything. So if you look at it that way and you understand that if you take away space, you have ultimate unity. Everything is together all at once. That's definitely not nothing. As a matter of fact, it would be like one heck of a black hole of something, like really, really full of mass. If you take away time, what do you have? Well, when we think about taking away a time, once again, we're tricked by our brains that have evolved within time. So when we say take away time, we're like, okay, so everything just sitting there still, but this is not the case, because if you take away time, time is the limiter of happenings. The reason I say it that way is because, well, first of all, let me just back up. We know for sure another thing existed before space-time. As a matter of fact, maybe it's the only thing we know that truly existed before space-time. Maybe it's the only thing, because we can say 100% for sure, like absolute logical, know for sure that before there was space-time, before there was this universe, there was the probability of this universe existing. okay? So there was that probability. You have a probability of a universe existing. So we know probability existed before the universe existed. That's like a logical truth that we can say for sure that there was a probability. So what does that mean when we throw in space and time? Is that now with space-time and things within it, we have stuff. We have stuff in the universe, like these fake plants and these shells and the light streaming through this window and this painting. But anyway, if you take away space-time, I mean, if you before there was space-time, what does space-time do? Well, it separates things. We know that. So things are separated in space-time. We have like stuff that can interact in space-time, and things can happen at a regular pace in space-time. Because without space-time, you're not going to have time for things to happen. You're not going to have an order for things to happen. You can't have what we perceive as causality and all that kind of stuff. Really, what it is the moving apart of probabilities, and so it's like space-time is molasses poured into infinite probability. So it spreads things out, things can happen. It's like a bubble, boom. An infinite probability of everything happening at once. So what I'm trying to say is that before there was a universe, everything that could happen happened instantaneously. I'm just saying that so that we can understand it with our human brains, but it's like everything. So outside the universe is not nothing, it's everything. Everything exists outside the universe. But what is everything happening at once? Well, think about multitasking at work. When a lot of shit starts happening at once, your productivity goes down like, I think it's 30 or 40%. It's like huge, because you can't move from one thing to another all the time. You have to be centered with meaning and purpose, and if you have to move to something else and then pull in the meaning and purpose which exists, there's a great huge interlocking set of things. It's like you pull that out of one task and push it into another task. It totally just decreases your ability to be productive. So that's just a little example of why it's super important that everything doesn't happen at once if you want to exist. So everything happening at once means that it just happens and is gone. But that's why there's something rather than nothing, though, because everything that has a probability of happening, no matter how small the probability is, when you take away the limitation of space-time, it happens. So all there is creation. Even before space-time, it's like an instant evolution. If you were to like spread the process out and look at it, yeah, are you getting it now? If you would spread the process out and look at it, the process of creation, you'd get a space-time universe. So guess what we're doing? We're spreading the process out and looking at it. And then you'd have to have one other additional factor. You'd have to have a selector of probabilities. So something that selects out probabilities. So we have a particular kind of space-time that has certain features that give rise to things like people and suns and things like that. Anthropic cosmology, I think a lot of people know about that now, but it's like this. There's a selector of probabilities. And I used to think that the selector of probabilities was existence. But we can certainly conceive of lots of universes that would exist but had no one inside them to understand that they existed, right? But is that just something we brought up in our minds? I think so, because a selector would have to pull themselves into existence. So they'd have to almost like exist and then select the means for their existence after the fact. So I think this is one of the reasons why. I mean, if you look at the universe before life came up, it was unconscious. So there's your universe without consciousness in it. But it's almost like, you know, when you drive somewhere and you get there and you're like, oh, I don't even remember getting here. How did I do that? Well, that's kind of like what happened when consciousness arose in the universe. We're like, what? I just got to this party. I don't remember driving those last few miles, but I'm here. I know I must have driven here. So we've gotten out our instruments and our telescope to look back in time. Looked at the Burgess Shale. And looked at the atom. Stared at the Hubble Deep Field. And we figured out that, hey, here's how we got here. So now we know how all this works and stuff. And the reason that's important is because now is the turning point in the universe. This is when we take the reins of our evolution. And that's caused some problems in the past because you have to understand things fully. You have to understand where we came from and where we're going. You have to understand what the universe is telling us. And to me, what truth is when a person or a civilization operates according to those principles that will keep it existing in space-time until it reaches that point when we become fully knowledgeable and fully able to select ourselves instead of having it happen blindly. That's when we come home. We're always looking for aliens, but they're us. And we're coming home across the universe. And our home is right here. In our brains. It's in the internet. It's in our universities. And it's us. So we are the ones that brought the universe into being. It's us. We are that which has come to know itself. And I think this is the thing that people don't understand, and what I was trying to write about in my book that I wrote almost 20 years ago, The Textbook of the Universe, The Genetic Ascent to God. And the universe is like a textbook that we were meant to read. It's like V.F. Skinner's teaching machines. It's full of rewards built in. If we go down the right path, and that reward is continued existence. There's so many paths in evolution where organisms became extinct. Why? It's because they decided they were going to... This is one of the things you can read in the universe that tells you what we should and shouldn't do. A lot of people like to say, like Sean Carroll and stuff, that we can't get more morality from science. You're never going to get it. I'm just like, what? That's like the entire point of science. Entire point. Because what is morality but doing the right thing? What is more right than doing what was written in the universe that we should do if we wanted to continue existing? That's pretty right. I think that we can safely say that any of those organisms that went extinct did the wrong thing. So, it's like Don Hoffman, he writes about how we just have this interface and we don't really know what reality is, and that's really a good thing. Well, here's what reality is. It's freaking an explosion of unutterable chaos of every infinite possibilities happening at once. Obviously, you can't exist in that. Boom, you're gone. You know what I mean? It's like you have to slow that stuff down. Select out of those possibilities that which would give you something like the universe and meaning and a timeline and stuff. And space-time is pretty important for existence. Without space-time, it's like you can't even have meaning. So it's just chaos. And that's like, that is worse than nothing. So Don Hoffman is absolutely right in that, but when you look at each line of evolution, it's like thinking. It's like working out a problem. Every single line of evolution, I don't care what it is, since the first organism, I like this, it's kind of poetic, the first organism developed light detectors, like a little single-celled organism with little patches that could detect light, because then they could move up closer to the surface of water or something and get more of the molecules they needed, or more of the photons of sunlight that they used or whatever, and then they would develop receptors to move towards gradients of sugar in solution. What they were doing is tuning those sensory systems inside of them to move and interact with the world in ways that would enable it to continue existing. So that's what we're doing. But in a way, it's like we're selecting out those possibilities that keep happening to organisms. And most of them are detrimental. We call them mutations. So you have an organism, sometimes they're partly successful and they move into a niche and they're like, oh, this is great, we got lots of food and everything. And then Earth changes and that niche goes away. And now, here's what organisms do. This is like a deadly process. It even happens in human society. Evolution is always happening everywhere. It can happen anytime there's information, and that's what evolution really is. It's information. Evolution has nothing to do with resources. It's so dumb. But anyway, it's all about information. That's how the universe could evolve instantly into the perfect configuration to give rise to its creator. So, an organism moving into a niche is like thinking. It's like, oh, this is a good idea. It's like all of evolution to me is morality. It's like testing theories of morality. It's like, well, here's a good idea. Let's start eating these creatures by the seashore, say. And I'm talking about like a mammalian four-legged creature sometime in the last few millions of billions of years, last billion years or so. And it was an air breather, eating these things on the seashore. There was competition. They start moving toward getting better and better at out-competing to go after this one food source. Does that seem like a good idea? It's like sustaining them. It works. If there's one thing that evolution likes, something that works to continue through time. So they continue through time, and then they become able to swim faster and faster. Fins, their snouts elongate. They're able to get fish from out of the coral better and stuff, and sooner than other ones without the shorter snout. And they develop smoother bodies and things, and pretty soon, what do you have? A dolphin. A dolphin has fins instead of fingers, or the ability to be selected to grasp things that they could actually put together and make tools with, because they need to swim through a medium that requires those limbs to swim through. We don't need fins to go through air, so since we're still on land, we're still good with that stuff. I mean, we're able to make hands and stuff, so. Anyway, they got into that, and they're kind of stuck in a dead end. And it's almost, when you look out at all the different species out there in evolution, you realize that they're like thinking. And I realize that I have lots of thoughts that evolve, and there's one thing that always bugged me. It was coming to a conclusion. Like, why would that bother me so much? I can't do it. Someone's like, what do you think about this? I'm like, I even wrote in a paper once, like, it's like breaking the cycle of causation and describing the two ends where you're at. It's relatively meaningless because everything else is connected to it. And then when I got to brain science, they're like, hey, here's a spot in the brain for this, a spot in the brain for that, a spot for that. There's no spots in the brain. Because if you look at everything in an information sense, every spot is defined by every other spot in the configuration of your brain. It's like when you're reading a novel. One word has meaning in the context of the sentence. I mean, there's that example from one of my cognitive textbooks when I was younger, where it says, these are cooking apples, or we are cooking apples. Cooking apples, that same thing means something else somewhere else. It's like our genes. We have the same genes, share 50% of our genes with the banana plant, but obviously the genes we made them mean something different. You can have the same substances from the periodic table put together into a protein that means something completely different than another protein. So this is why I don't like to form conclusions, because I'm reading the universe. You have to put it all together. You can't just stop and look at one thing, because you're going to be partially wrong. So this is what happens with organisms. They go into their niches and stuff, and then they die out. That's why 99% of species that ever existed are now dead. And we know this. We've looked back at the fossil record. We can see all this stuff. And we can also look out around the world, and we can see all these other species and how they form and stuff, and the niches they have. Like giraffes have super long necks to get leaves that are extra high and stuff like that. But it's like, that's just one thing. It's almost like in Pinocchio, or they turn into asses, or they do a certain thing. It's like, that's the thing that overtook everything in their existence. Now, if you look around the world and try to find something where there was not one thing like that overtook their existence, it's humans. So it's like, what overtook our existence? Think about it. Okay, we started making symbols, runes. Originally, runes reflected like natural things in the environment, like the forked rune of life with the three things sticking up. That was supposed to be like a forked stick, or anything that grows does that and branches out. And that's poetic too. And that's what I'm saying about the universe, is that everything has meaning that's like interwoven. It really does. That's how the universe was made. It was made to be informational, to teach the creators growing within it. And the creators growing within it are the ones that have the ability to see and read symbols and put them together in such a way and reproduce them, and thereby form like a loop where we bootstrap ourselves up. And that's the same thing the universe is doing. So it's like, of course the universe is intelligible, or it wouldn't exist, because we're the ones that are going to bring it into existence. We got to know this stuff. So a brain is not... When I was in graduate school, I wrote this. I wrote this in my book too, and that is, there's nothing in evolution that says when we open somebody's head and look at their brains, we're going to know what's going on. That was not selected for in no part of our history. So it's like, we look at our brains being an information structure, if it is woven into the fabric of the universe in such a way, in space-time, that I even said this, that maybe time and space do not exist for the brain. And we open it and look at it in the sense of Don Hoffman's ideas. When we open a brain and look in there, right, we're projecting the space-time that we use to operate within the world into a brain. It's really not like that. Okay, so we're finding analogies. We see the symbols for things happening in the brain in there. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like, we're not seeing the whole story. So in lots of areas of life, though, we've not seen the whole story. We've been able to come up with things to enable us to see the whole story better. So like, we can only see this like tiny band of the electromagnetic spectrum, but we've got, like, I was just talking about that Chandra X-ray observatory thing. You can see outside of it, with infrared detectors and X-rays and night vision and things like that. Radar. I mean, we can see outside these things. Radio telescopes. Maybe we're going to find something like that which will allow us to see what's going on in the brain. And I think that the instruments that we're looking for are very different than what we think they're going to be. And I tried to form some ways of looking at our experiences that allowed us to understand these things in my book. But it's going to be more something like that. And I think it's why humans have religions and other animals don't have religion, is because we can see these things coming. The signals that are bringing us into being and telling us where to go have become strong enough that we've made religions. But among us, there are those who still want to go into a niche. That the great life force of which we've become the figurehead knows our dead ends. And it's telling us through the world that we see, through the holistic patterns of things, which of course we know in brain science is the right brain kind of stuff, which is also the emotional right brain where religions tend to come from. That's where our religious brain or whatever. So those things kind of go together, but what I'm saying is that sin becomes really intelligible, and it seems like it's moral to think about sin when you consider that those are dead ends. If you are ignorant, that's supposed to be a bad thing. And I'm talking about ignorant in the grand sense, about not understanding things in the world in general and not caring to, then that's saying, I want to commit suicide. Because the things that will move forward in the world are those things which learn. It's not optional. And the things we need to learn are the meaning of things. Because anytime you understand the meaning of something, built into it is the ability to transcend obstacles having to do with that thing you've learned. So we've learned so much about our universe and even the sun that we can eventually, in like a few billion years, when the sun runs out of fuel and it goes red giant and then it becomes bigger than the orbit of like Mars, absorbs Earth, and there's no place to live in this solar system anymore, we better have plans. So it's like every single one of these hurdles, that's a bigger one for humans, but in the grand context of a huge, giant universe, it's not that big of a hurdle. We're still moving forward. This is the weird thing, that we can now, for the first time in history, see the things that our distant relatives in the future are going to have to overcome. And it's not an accident. We need to start thinking about them right now. It's like we tell our kids, you need to pick a major in college because humanity needs to major in life. It's like, what? Why do we need to even tell people this? It's like we know what's bad. I mean, if we look in our heart, what is our heart? Look in our heart to know what's bad. We know it's bad for two reasons. Evolution has started to build into us things that transcend the moment, that transcend the here and now. I mean, that's the whole idea, really, of evolution, is that to maximize your existence in space-time for eternity. So it's like we have feelings built into us. And I noticed when I was younger that I start feeling feelings, and they seemed like information to me. For some reason, it's like fear, drives. It wasn't, I realized it wasn't me, I realized that it was like information coming from my ancestors. I don't know how to say it, but I really liked learning about things. And so I looked at that and I thought about it and thought about it a lot. I just kept thinking about it. I thought about everything so much. My last girlfriend before I got married was like, you think too much. But if you do think about everything and you expand its meaning in your mind, then you eventually see all this stuff happening and everything fits together. And it only fits together in one way. One. And that is the way that I wrote about it in my book, is that we're all moving towards this point in the future, like Teilhard de Chardin's omega point, which I love that concept. I mean, he felt it and got it. So it's like there's two ways to know something, okay? And that is, one way is by feelings, like I feel like something tastes good, I feel like I want to go reproduce. I have a lot of trouble with that because I'm transgender. I don't have a lot of feelings that way. But anyway, you have these different feelings that you feel like you don't want to hurt someone, you don't want to do something bad and things like that, because that was good for our future. You don't want to betray someone because you have to have unity in order to overcome obstacles as a people, and things like that. So these started getting built into us as emotions, even at like the primate stage. So, we have these feelings. And then the other thing that allows you to understand morality, because feelings absolutely can lie to you. Like like the animals that felt that it was good to stay by the seashore because they could get food there and keep moving towards being dolphins, that then dead-ended in the lack of ability to have a opposed thumb and stuff and to manipulate symbols like we do. So it's like the only way you can get around that is to have logic and meaning, because a lot of the obstacles you don't understand, they're not just out in the world out there. A lot of the obstacles we have are inside of us. They're psychological obstacles. So a lot of my thinking, like most of my thinking early on in psychology, one of the reasons I got into it is because I wanted to know what those tricks and obstacles were in my own mind. That's like the most important thing. So that's what I did. And so that's the other way you can know is like logic and understanding the way that the universe is built. And if you understand that life was thinking when it made organisms and sent them into niches, thinking. It was also like a great dragon or like a great organism with feelers, feeling into each niche like an octopus suckers on a rock or something. You just go, can I live here? No. Can I go over here? No. Going to these different places and stuff, and pretty soon it realized that the best thing to do is have a brain that can understand principles, the basic way things work. Because if you don't, you're just going to be automatically sucked into a niche, and you're just focused. When you specialize and focus, you're dead, basically. Because then you stop learning and stop thinking. And it's the same thing in life. I've noticed that, might ruffle some feathers here, but like I noticed when I was in graduate school that a lot of professors, when they found a thing to write about or do in the lab, that became their bread and butter, or they got tenure, things like that. Tenure's good, I really like it, but you just have to make sure you give tenure to people that are super motivated to think, because then it's super good, because now they have this time to think, and and you can't kick them out for thinking the wrong things and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome. But it's like a two-edged sword. Like anything else, it's a two-edged sword, because your brain is built, because it's an evolutionary device, it is built to want to have resources and to relax in front of a TV. To not have to really do or move anywhere. And when it doesn't have to anymore, it starts going away. It uses too many resources, like blind cave fish. You're not challenged anymore. So evolution is thinking. It's physical thinking. And what's thinking? The universe. And what is the universe? It's becoming the creator. So life is the thoughts of the creator through time. as it's figuring out how to come into this universe. And it can come into the universe in people, like in our brains. And the way it does that is that we think. You have to be motivated by truth. It's almost like treading water. You can tread a brain. You can come into the universe in someone's brain. So I see where this happened in the past. And when I used to talk to Francis Crick, it was really weird sometimes because we would be thinking the same things. And I didn't think it was weird because I knew that he was very thoughtful and he was someone that was motivated by truth. Even though he became famous, this is what I love about Francis Crick. I always bring him up. I brought him up in my book too, is that he got the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA. Co-discoverer, Watson Crick. And he not only did not stop there or rest on his laurels, he kept moving forward, and he got into consciousness, studying consciousness. And what drew me to consciousness, because I really thought through the paradoxes and the things that were happening, like the binding problem. I figured that out as a paradox before they had a name for it, like way back in the day. I was thinking about those things when I was in college, because I was in psychology and they didn't have a really big program of biopsychology or something at ISU, and so I had to think about that stuff on my own. So I just taught myself neuroscience. That's how I was able to go to Emory and behavioral neuroscience. But I could see, I was like, what the hell? How come the stuff that I know of in psychology there's no place for it to happen in neuroscience? It's not happening. I'm like, really, people? You didn't see that there's something big here, like wrong with this? And it really freaked me out. And so when I got to college, graduate school, I tried to talk to some professors about this, and it just really didn't go well because everything that they had based their studies on was like a niche for, I really like this running skirt. It was like a niche that they could move into. They have not only a niche, but humans have social niches. I mean, obviously in high school you form cliques and all this kind of crap. But so do professors, and not all of them are thinkers. I mean, it's not to say they're not smart. It's a big difference. Like I'm a member of Mensa. I'll go to Mensa meetings sometimes, and there's like Jeopardy smart, where you know a lot of facts and you look smart for social reasons, and you can use your smarts for that. Nothing wrong with that, really, in the short run. But the real using of smarts is to be like so fundamentally motivated by truth that you would choose it over sex, food, anything. That is the life force talking when you're like that. That's a person that's eventually going to be someone that the creator is going to work through. So I knew Francis Crick was one of those. And every time I run into people that aren't, it just really causes problems. Another one was Jordan Peterson. I met him in 2001. And it was like I met a long-lost brother or something. Because I've always been interested in religions and all that kind of stuff too. And when we met, we talked for, like a couple hours straight. Just like, to me, everything else went away. And it was funny because I had a t-shirt that had like this dragon on it that came around like this. And there was a surfer coming through. At the time I was really into surfing. And it had the dragon's head was like the top of the wave coming up like this, and the surfer was down here coming through it. And so I walk up to his poster and I'm looking, and the reason I walked up there is because he had all these dragons that looked just like the dragon on my shirt. These circular dragons and his theories. I was like, what? That's cool. So I came up and I started talking to him, and it turns out that he's really very smart. And he likes to think a lot. And so we hit it off right away. And a lot of the stuff that he thought about, I had already thought about for many, many years. And he was just out there putting it out, So I have to commend him for that. It takes a lot of courage to be someone like that. And so I'm really happy he's like really getting famous based on the things that we talked about that back then people didn't really talk about. But I mean, maybe he doesn't get the whole picture of things in general. I mean, a lot of people don't, but wow, he is really, really awesome. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. His book, Maps of Meaning, when I read it, it like immediately became one of my top 10 books of all time. So anyway, I just realized it's kind of getting late. I've got to go do some stuff. I just want to make an introductory video. I wrote a book called The Textbook of the Universe, The Genetic Ascent to God. And in it, I was so upset that people, like, for political correctness reasons, won't talk about certain things, and they won't say things that are the truth because they don't hurt people's feelings and stuff. But it's super important. Like, this is like the most important thing, like of deadly importance. Like, it's a moral imperative to me, is that you have to look truth straight in the face as we know it, in the Donald Hoffman sense, that the stuff that we know and pay attention to is the stuff that's going to continue our existence in space-time. That's kind of what Don's saying too. He says it in a different way, and it's like kind of sensationalized a bit, but same thing I've been saying in my book, and that is what truth is what continues our existence in space-time. As well as we know it, that's what it is, because beyond space-time is a chaos of infinite possibilities. So we know there's infinite things that could happen other than what's happening in this universe. But guess what? What's happening in this universe, that's our interface, allows existence. So I'm on board with it, the logic of it, the meaning of it, and the beauty of it. And it is a beautiful thing because it's a construction. It's like a sculpture. It's us. And it's so mind-boggling. It's like the brain is like this torus. It's like the universe is woven through and comes through our brain and back out, and like this pulling itself into existence. It's like in my book, why I wrote about the mirror universe. I talked to these physicists from Russia that wrote this book called The Mirror Universe, where time goes in the other direction. That comes out of the equations from physics. And oh my God, I look horrible. But anyway, I just want to say I wrote that book, Textbook of the Universe, The Genetic Ascent to God, God being what we're becoming in the future. And learning is not only not optional, it's like everything. Information is not like some funny thing in some backwater of science. It's everything. Information is the key to how we got here and where we're going. It's the key to reality, everything. So, hope that made sense, because I didn't even write any notes or anything. But next video I make, I will try to make notes on it and stuff, because there's so much more where this is going and the meaning of things that are happening right now. And I want to comment on other writers, like a couple I mentioned briefly, that are kind of coming out now, like Don Hoffman and stuff, and Sean Carroll's ideas. And biocentrism, it's basically what my book was all about. I mean, you can say things are biocentric, but to really get traction on that idea and move forward, you have to understand about information and learning and metaphors. Metaphors, poetry, not just some fluff, people. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.